Thank you very much. So, welcome to our town hall on the nuts and bolts of running for office. This is the last in a series of democracy-related events that the League has hosted this month. It's been really fantastic. We started the month with a phone bank on primary day. We followed it with a really great conversation on encouraging more women to run on public affairs, public access earlier this month. And if you're interested in viewing that, it's on the Houston Media Source YouTube page, and we've shared it on the League of Women Voters Facebook page. We also partnered with Sketch City on a really fantastic hack night on the issue of democracy earlier this month, and the turnout to that was phenomenal. And then here we are tonight to talk about the nuts and bolts of running for office. We highly encourage social media participation in our events. So if you want to be tweeting and Facebooking the event, please feel free. Our handle for the League is at LWV Houston, and the hashtag that we use is VoteHU, H-O-U. So I want to take just a second to thank the University of Houston's Hobby Center for Public Policy for hosting us tonight. They've been a fantastic partner to us. I also want to thank January Advisors for their help in assembling the events for the month, and the Black Sheep Agency for the really fantastic graphics that we've been using for all of our events. So with that, I want to hop right into the topic because I want to give you as much of these fantastic speakers as I can. And honestly, I'm very excited about the panelists that we've been able to put together for you tonight. Just so much knowledge on this panel and on the panel that will follow. And I'm sure you can guess that 2 45-minute panels are really only going to be the tip of the iceberg on these topics. This event is intended to kick off a bigger discussion about these topics and what it will take in order to home grow some really fantastic leaders for Houston. And so what we hope is you'll engage with the panelists after the event, you'll continue these conversations when you go out into your aspects of the community, and the League also hopes to facilitate more conversations on these topics going forward. So stay tuned to our Facebook page for information about that. Our first panel tonight is truly our logistical panel, the nuts and bolts of what it looks like to run for office. And I want to take just a second to introduce our panelists to you. We're not going to go into detailed bios because they want to talk to you about the meat of the discussion, but we have very detailed bios on each of our panelists in the event that was created for tonight, which you can find on our League of Women Voters Facebook page if you want more information about them and what it is that they do. So we'll start on my far right. We have Alam Adatia, who is a political consultant. He has served as a campaign staffer, currently serves as a campaign staffer, and also has served as a policy consultant on campaigns, and then also for officials in office. Next to him, we have Carrie Christman, who is the executive director of Red State Women. She's also been a campaign strategist and is a current congressional political staffer. To my left, we have Kim Jessup, who is the principal at Just Win Strategies. She has a wealth of campaign and political staff experience on a very wide variety of campaigns, not only for electeds, but also for issues. And then next to Kim, we have Josh Sanders, who is the policy director for Hall Attorneys. And he also is a former political staffer and campaign staffer who does a lot of work on not only political candidates' campaigns, but also issue campaigns. So, Josh, I'm actually going to kick off the conversation with you, and this is a question for the panel, so we'll go across the way. But the first question really is a pretty basic one, and that's, where do you start? If you think you want to run for office, where do you start?
Obviously, anybody that's looking to run for office, it's an issue that you need to put a lot of thought into. One of the things we kind of talked about as a group beforehand that's important is just really identifying why you want to run for office. Are there problems that you're trying to address? Is there a certain political office that you'd like to run for? So looking through all those different variety of things, you really need to put some thought into what you're actually trying to do and what position you'd like to run for. A lot of people that end up running for office, it takes one event or one issue in their life that really catapults them into public service. And so identifying what issues are important to you and then looking at what position of elected office can best help you address those issues that you are concerned most about is really one of the first steps that you need to take when thinking about running for office.
Great, thank you. Kim, what are your thoughts? Where do you start?
I concur with what Josh said. Just to expound on a little bit, I think that once you do take that leap to make a decision that this is something that you feel like you're called to do, and this is something that you really want to put your time and your energy into, you have to look at the scope of what it's going to take to get there, and that includes surveying your family and the people that are the closest to you, and understanding what that's going to do to them in their life, because you're going to be putting yourself out there in front, and it's going to set you up for people to make up things about you, maybe reading in the paper and things like that. So I think it's really time to give some soul searching as to why you're doing it and which office you want to run for, if it's city and the city issues are something that's really gets you up in the morning, if it's trash pickup and speed humps and draining ditches and things like that, or is it something that's going on at the state level, or something in between, or something at a school board level because you have children that are going into school level and you want to look at that. But how that's going to affect the family, I think, is very critical, and I think that's one of the first things. And then once you get past that, I think that you can start putting together, your database of what does your grassroots look like? I mean, who is it that's going to support you, and what is your friends and family, and how is that going to work? And then that takes you to the next level of the campaign.
Thank you. Carrie?
Well, I would just say that I think Josh hit on something that was really important that I'd like to hit home on. There are really two different ways that you get involved in campaigns, and one is truly organically, where maybe you start at a young age, or your interest in civics, maybe in a local organization. It could be PTA, it could be the Masons, it could be any organization that you hold some type of office that you're elected to. And so that's really the organic route. And I would encourage people who are interested, obviously, it's not just a state house race or a state senate race or a U.S. congressional race. There are so many ways that you can hold office, particularly at a local level. And I really would encourage you to get involved organically and start that process to see what position would fit you best. The other issue that Josh touched on that I think is really interesting when you look at some of the stories, my background, I've been in the Texas legislature since 2001 and in Texas politics since 1998. And one of the interesting, the other component, if you're not going to start organically, is really this one issue that Josh touched on. And the perfect example, if you remember Representative Suzanne Hupp, there was a story that ran today. I think she was featured in Texas Monthly. And she was one of the champions for Texas passing the concealed handgun license. And the issue that catapulted her career in legislative politics really was a tragic one in 1991, where she lost her parents to a mad shooter in a Luby's in Central Texas. I think if you would have asked her prior to that, she was a chiropractor in private practice. And she probably didn't realize that she would ever have a career in legislative politics. So I really think there are two ways to go about it, and those are just some examples.
Alan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just to piggyback on, I definitely agree that determining why you're running and sort of partnering up with a particular issue that's important to you is the most important thing. But once you've done that, I think especially if you have the benefit of time, there are some very basic steps you can take to sort of start making a presence for yourself, building a brand in the community, and sort of maybe getting a presence on social media. Many of you may not have a Twitter account. You may not have a Facebook page in which you're politically active. Start doing that. You need to start reading up on the issues that affect the area in which you're running, whether it's a district seat, whether it's an at-large seat, whether it's something at state or national level. You need to sort of bone up on all those issues because they may become important, even if they're not the issue. And you should definitely dig really deep into the issue that separates you from everybody else. And then I think, in addition to that, the family thing is extremely important. When you run, your family runs, and they need to be well aware of that. You need to allow them to enter the campaign with eyes wide open and be a support system for you, as opposed to something that you're constantly butting up against because they didn't expect it to be this way. And there are things you're not going to expect. Lastly, I would say, in addition to all of that, if you can, find someone that you respect personally, that maybe not new to the campaign, in the community that you can work with. It can be someone that has some experience in this area that you can bounce ideas off of. I think for first-time candidates, it's really important. You feel like you're getting pitched a lot of things, you're getting told a lot of things that will be beneficial for you, and you really need someone that you respect. And a lot of that will come from you getting involved in the community. Join organizations like LWV and other organizations that allow you to meet people who truly believe in, potentially pushing forward your platform and your ideas.
Thank you. So, Alam, actually, this next question, I'm going to start with you. So, let's say you've sort of gone through this process of I want to run and here's what I think I want to run for. Can we talk about what the aspects of a campaign are and how you decide, if you need a team, what a team might look like? How do you start making those preliminary decisions about a campaign?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is going to get decided by probably your next panel. It's what you have the resources for in a lot of situations. I mean, you can have a full-blown team that include communications, field, policy, a campaign manager, a whole, senior advisors, consultants, a general consultant that's separate. But a lot of that can get wrapped into a single campaign manager, potentially no campaign manager, depending on the resources that you have. So I think that becomes really critical. I think overall, you have to have a good understanding, and perhaps this may be the most important thing, of how much financial resources you have going in. It's a really serious question. It's hard to gauge, and I'm sure your next panel will address it. But I think those are the different areas, and they either get combined. Compliance becomes finance in one, your web person becomes your communications person, or they all get wrapped up into your campaign manager. So I think having a hard look at what your finances are, or who in your family and friend circle is willing to sort of chip in to get you off the ground, will in large part dictate your viability and what you will have in terms of the staff.
Thank you. So we're going to come over to Josh to continue the question. I think I might pivot just a little bit because in our preparation for this panel, we were talking about this really in terms of stewardship of the resources that you have. So can we, we understand that the money is a big piece. That's a whole nother panel. But can we talk about the resources that you do have that are given to you by people who support you? How do you make decisions about how to use those wisely?
Yeah, and asking for money from somebody is one of the most uncomfortable things that anybody can go through, and it takes a lot of practice. And people are giving up their hard-earned dollars. They're not getting tax breaks. They're not getting any of the benefit, but they're betting on you, and they're betting in the idea of you becoming an elected official. So those resources are extremely important, and it's very important at how you spend those. You want to make sure that you're getting the bang for your buck, in other words. And so not only with resources, which the next panel will cover, but time management. Your time as a candidate is one of the most important things that you have. Time for anybody is one of the most important, valuable things that you have. And so being a good steward of your time, managing your time effectively, making sure that you're communicating with the most people with each different event, and having somebody there to help you manage your time. A lot of candidates run into the problem of trying to have too much control over their campaign and their time. One of the things working as a consultant that you constantly butt up against with candidates is them wanting to control things. And you're being paid as a consultant, or you're paying somebody as a consultant to manage those things for you, to take those things off your plate so you can go out and meet people. You can introduce yourself, you can express your ideas, and you can articulate why you're running for that certain office. And so not only from a money standpoint as it's a finite resource and you've got to manage that properly, your time has to be managed properly, and most people have a difficult time giving that up.
Can I add to that? Candidates should do two things: raise money and raise votes. Everything else should be left to their volunteer base and to their consulting team or their staff of team, however they put it together. In order to be a candidate, you need to be a good leader. And being a good leader means that you know how to do exactly what Josh was saying, and that's to delegate. And that's to delegate the things that other people are better at doing than you are. And again, candidates should raise money and votes. Those are the two things. I like to use a phrase sometimes with the candidates, like I want to put them in a box. Candidate goes back in the box, and then you pull them out when you need them to go after votes and you need to go raise money, because no one else can ask for money. And as difficult as it is, it's very rewarding once you do start getting some money in and people do believe in you enough to write that first $25 check. Because you understand that they're investing in good government, they're investing in you, they're investing in your vision and what you see, and so they're okay with writing a check. So it takes away a little bit of that hesitancy for you asking. And when you say, okay, this is not to me, I'm not going to go buy new shoes, I'm going to actually help make my city, my state, my county better. I think that as long as a candidate can understand what his or her limitations are in running when they first start, that they will be 3 steps ahead of probably their opponents to start off with.
Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say that to really focus on some of the actual positions and individuals that you would need to assemble for a team. And I'm going to speak from a state perspective because that's where my knowledge really comes from. Let's say you want to run for state representative. It varies across the state how much that race is going to cost geographically where you're located. That race may cost anywhere from $75,000 to a good $500,000 to $750,000, depending on where you're running. And if you're a first-time person, first-time candidate running, there are going to be some key positions that you need to fill. And you really want to kind of keep it all in the family, but you want to make sure your family's qualified, right? And you want to trust those individuals. Some of those folks really need to be have a background in maybe accounting, bookkeeping. The information and the deadlines and the requirements that you have to follow with the Texas Ethics Commission, that's important. And as a candidate, you need to be able to trust a financial bookkeeper or accountant to take care of those things, not miss those deadlines, ensure that your campaign is transparent and honest and ethical. So I would say find somebody that you can contract. Everything is negotiable. Contract with somebody at a low rate. Maybe they do it pro bono for a while and it's an in-kind contribution. And then also I would focus on somebody who really has great organizational skills. And if they know your network already, really it's basically getting your network down on paper and an Excel spreadsheet, and really starting to reach out to that database. Have that person that has the organizational skills be a grassroots leader. Make sure that person knows the neighborhood well, knows the geographical area in which you're running well. I would also say have somebody, maybe you have a college daughter or a son that's obviously going to be more hip on social media. I have a daughter in college and I go to her on almost everything. So I would just say, think practical. I mean, there are ways to run a low budget, low key campaign that's still very effective, but you need to think about all these positions, and you can fill them in a very logical, very practical way to meet a first-time candidate's needs.
Great, thank you. So Kim, I would like to come back to you for a minute and talk about the getting votes part of the candidate's job from your perspective, because that's something that we were discussing earlier, and I would like to kick the question off with you about what does it mean to put together a platform and decide how to articulate what you stand for as a candidate? What does that look like?
I think it goes back to first, why are you running? If you can't articulate why you want to be in office, then you need to step back and take the time to be able to do that and soul search as to what are the issues, which race are you running for, and what does that look like? What is driven you to get to the point to decide that you actually want to be an elected official, and understanding what all is going to come, because people are going to look to you to be the leader. So you have to take that very, very seriously. So once you've made that decision and you've come up with what your issues are, I think that it's fair to say that you want to go around and talk to your neighbors and your family and say, what are your concerns in the community? What are your concerns that you're seeing going on in our city and our state and our county? And develop things that you're spending more time listening than telling people what you think, and developing your ideas based on what the people are looking for as opposed to what you want the people to see. And I think that's very, very important. And then it becomes a balance. It becomes a balance of, I believe in this, and you're not jeopardizing what you believe in because of what somebody else may tell you should believe in or what they think. But if you truly understand and have your pulse on the people by going to going to city council meetings, by going to your neighborhood homeowners association and your civic club and your all the different super neighborhood meetings or town hall meetings that may be out there, and listening. I can't stress enough, listening, and then developing how you feel about each of the main topics that are being presented. And don't try to be all things to all people. I think that's really important too. Don't try to tackle all the issues. Just try to pick, your top 3 to 5 and scale those and really work those and feel really, really passionate about them, because that will be conveyed when you're out communicating with the voters.
Great. So Carrie, on vote getting, any thoughts?
So I would just focus, I'll take a little bit different angle. If you're a candidate running against an incumbent, I would really focus on what differentiates yourself from that incumbent. And really understand, let's say it's a state legislative position, really understand, what votes they had taken and how you would have done something differently. And then I would just piggyback on what Kim said. A lot of times folks think, I want to tell you all about what I believe and what my principles are. And really, elected office is a service. It's a public service position. You should do much more listening than talking. And I think people will value that much more than you taking the time to spout off, a laundry list of issues that are important to you. So I would just encourage those interested in running to really do more listening.
Right. Olin?
Yeah, just quickly, I think I would add, unless you're a candidate with incredible name ID and already have a significant presence in the community, you're going to get those votes on the doors. So I think one of the things you have to do is be prepared as an individual to spend time every day. I think between fundraising and field, which is the time you spend at the doors convincing people why you should be the person they vote for, you're probably going to spend anywhere, on the low end, I think 75% of your time. And if you are spending a lot less, then it's probably not a good thing. The other aspect, I think, is once you identify what drives you, or like why you want to be, why you think you're going to win, is a consultant will usually come in and say, okay, that's why you think you should run for office. Now let's do like a SWOT analysis on this. Let's look at the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats of this office at this particular time that you are running against your opponent. And then you go even further and look at, okay, what does Rita want the voters to think about Rita? What does Rita's opponent want the voters to think about Rita? And then you kind of break it down like that. What is Rita's opponent going to say about herself? And how do you match it up to make it look like you have someone who's in politics, who's a fresh perspective against an incumbent who's been there a long time, hasn't done stuff for the community well, as opposed to someone who's inexperienced versus someone who's experienced. So then you need to become strategic after you've sort of decided what makes you tick and why you feel this is important to you. And you can start putting pen to paper on that stuff. The more time you have on the front end, the more time you have to meet people that can help you do that, or the more time you have to actually just go through it yourself. It's, in a lot of ways, it seems daunting, but it's not that complicated. And I think it will provide a lot of clarity and allow you the opportunity to really find out whether this is something viable for you.
Yeah. Josh?
Yeah, I think all points are very well made. One thing I would add is, when you talk about getting votes, there are a lot of professional organizations, individual types of groups where, maybe a friend who's a realtor, maybe somebody in the League of Women Voters. And so looking through your current friend base, your family base, and identifying friends within these different groups that play in politics that can help then advocate for you within this group of common individuals. Because a lot of nonprofit organizations, professional organizations obviously get engaged in politics. And you'll go through a screening process, you'll fill out questionnaires. And when you know somebody that's one of these professionals that are part of these groups, they can help guide you as to what the positions of those groups are. And once you get the endorsement of, say, the Houston Association of Realtors, that's over 20,000 individuals and members that then are communicated to support you. So looking to your friends, figuring out what your friends' professions are, what your family members' professions are, what types of organizations they're a part of, what types of organizations you're a part of, and starting to try to spread your message and really articulate your campaign through those channels really will help in the long run, because you'll end up bringing groups and blocks of voters with you instead of having to go, and you couple that obviously with everything that's been set up here. Press the flesh. I mean, that's one of the best things that you can do to get anybody's vote, is if everybody in here has probably had a candidate or somebody come to their doorstep. And, if somebody takes their time and gives up their freedom to come to your doorstep to articulate what their vision is, you probably give them, a good 5 minutes or so to let them do that. So those are all very important things when going through this process. Great.
Thank you guys so much. And I will add, if you're a candidate and the League of Women Voters sends you a questionnaire to fill out, fill it out. Because hundreds of people look at our voter guide, and wouldn't you like to be included in it? Okay, off the panel for me. So, Carrie, I want to direct the next question to you first. One of the things that we were discussing, and just for everyone's recollection, one of Carrie's focuses is encouraging women to run. And we were talking about the fact that there are a lot of roadblocks, perceived and otherwise, that people have in mind when they think about running for office that can sometimes discourage an otherwise good candidate from actually taking the plunge and running. So I would like to hear from the panel about some of those myths to be busted, or if they are real roadblocks, some ideas about how to get around them for a good candidate.
Absolutely. It's one of the same things that we hear throughout, individuals expressing interest running for office, yet then taking a step back. And we do tend to see more males run than females. And one thing that Red State Women does focus on is encouraging women to run and take that step. And really, like I said before, there are all levels of holding office. And so we've got to remove this myth that it's a state legislative office, or it's only county commissioner, or it's only U.S. Congress. There are so many other positions that are extremely important to local levels of government. And yes, everything takes time, but so does PTA. So do these nonprofit organizations that you spend time on. If you would just sit down and think about the number of things that you spend your time and dedicate to your resources, time and resources to, I would imagine that every single individual that is interested in running, whether you're male or female, whether you have a family, whether you're single, whether you're a professional, you've got time to spare. And really invest research into how long is it going to take me to do this? How much time do I really need to invest? And so do your homework. And I think if you actually took the time and spoke to a legislator or a city council person, they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to say, this is how we juggle it. This is how we do it at home. My husband's here today. I have 3 jobs. I'm a chief of staff. I've been a chief of staff for 12 years. It is more than a full-time job. I'm on call 24 hours a day. My cell phone is in my husband's lap. He knows that he would bring it up to me right now if I needed to. We have 2 children, one in college, one in elementary school. He's a realtor. It's full time. You juggle things. You work things out. And I just want to encourage women, remove these barriers from your mind that tell you that there's not enough time, or I can't do that and have a family. It's not easy, but nothing in life worth doing is easy. And so I would just encourage you to really find a mentor and have that conversation about removing those roadblocks or those myths that you have.
Olam, any myths you'd like to bust?
Just quickly to add on to that, I think the idea that you need this massive political machine to run for office is completely not true. And especially in this day and age where you can do so much with technology, you can run a really efficient campaign with a limited amount of human resources, actually. And I think just looking into that, taking the time to get on social media, but more importantly, using Google and Google Calendar very effectively, and using MailChimp to build a database properly. If you have time, once again, starting to keep track of names in an organized fashion that you can leverage down the line. Joining organizations where people will vote in a lot of ways because that organization supported you, or aligning yourself with organizations that are like yours and making a presence for yourself in the community. You can go really far on very little in terms of human resources and very little in terms of financial resources if you're willing to put in sort of the sweat equity in. And so the myth that people have spent years and years and years building up these political machines, and a lot of times isn't true. And you hear some really great stories of people that make some really big changes, or are able to bring an issue to light, even if they're not successful in winning the campaign, that have a huge impact on the community. It may be the one thing more than voting. It is the one thing, I think, greater than voting, that in which you can have the greatest impact on your community. It's the one step beyond that, to really bring an issue to light, or to really try and make a difference. So.
Josh?
One thing I would say is don't be discouraged. Building name ID and establishing yourself as a candidate for office is a difficult thing, and it takes time and it takes effort. And just like they said, you don't need to have this massive political machine. And sometimes the best way to get involved in politics is baptism by fire. Put your name out there. What better way to learn to run for office than to run for office? You know how many politicians in this country lose their first race or lose their first 3 races and keep getting after it? And that tenacity and that willingness to show that you're dedicated to serve the public does not go unnoticed. People pay attention to that. And the people that continue to get in the ring and continue to fight typically get rewarded. And so don't be discouraged. If this is something that you're passionate about and you have a calling to serve your community, continue to go after it. Because, like I said, I mean, people that are involved in the arena in which we are, you can get into a race and you can be the favorite, and something happens during the race. There's an issue that pops up. You don't know what voter turnout's going to be. Elections, as we like to think, are very predictable, are so unpredictable, it's not even funny. And so just continue to get after it and start small, like they've said. Go after any elected position, even if you're an officer in an organization. All of that prepares you to eventually run for a public elected office.
Kim?
Just to add a little bit, I think that having a name ID is something that I run across when I talk with potential clients, is that they say, well, nobody knows who I am. I've just done some work in my homeowners association. Well, I can tell countless stories, as I know everyone up here can, of people that had zero name ID when they came into a decision to make themselves run for office and ended up getting elected. I think it's perseverance, and I think it's all about determination and dedication. Just to reiterate that, you can be a very small fish in a very large city and make a huge difference as long as you're committed and you're dedicated, and you can build your grassroots around. And so it's just, don't ever give up. Don't ever think that you're not worthy. If you're a voter, you're a voter, and you do make a difference every time you go and cast your ballot. And that's one thing I will say, is make sure you are a voter if you're going to run for office. Because that has been an issue before too. So.
And if you need to register to vote, we have forms at the back of the room for you. So I want to make sure we reserve time for some questions from the audience. So I have only one more, and we'll start with you, Kim. We have already talked a bit, Alam touched on this, about how it's important to go into a campaign eyes wide open and with your family eyes wide open. So I would like for each of you to just, answer this question with one thing. If you're going to run for office, you should know, or you should be aware,
that your private life is no longer private.
Carrie?
That it doesn't pay what you think.
Public service. Yeah. Alam?
I don't know. I think that that it can be, that you may end up saying sorry a lot more than you expected, but it shouldn't discourage you at all.
Great. Josh?
Nobody's perfect. Elected officials are not people that have spent their whole life doing nothing wrong. Everybody has issues. Everybody has something in their background that they may not be proud of, or they don't want people exploring. So it's just like any crisis management. Own up to who you are. People oftentimes respond to the humanity in things. So be prepared for that, and don't run from it.
Right. So I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to ask my lovely assistant, Jeff, to pass the mic. Does anybody have a question for our fantastic panel? Here. I'm going to make you stand up.
Hi. Hello.
It's just for the
Sorry, it's for the live feed.
Sorry.
So speak up.
My name is Nikki Verani. So I don't know if this is applicable. A question for Houston is very, very diverse. So how would you take that diversity into consideration when you were building your platform, or does it matter? Should you even consider something like that and take it into account?
Alam, you're actively involved in campaigns, so we'll start with you.
Just full disclosure, I don't either way. I just finished a campaign, but it was a campaign that had a sort of a diverse component to it. It was a district that is cited as being potentially 80% Latino. So it should be taken into account. I think you need to, in a lot of ways, if the platform that you're presenting is something that doesn't resonate with that particular community, that's going to be a problem. So when you think about diversity, I don't think you should look at it as an impediment or a reason for not getting into a race. I don't think the fact that you are your particular race or ethnicity matches with the greatest component of that particular district or area or whatever else it is barred to you running. I don't think it should be. I don't think you should consider it. But I think you should consider the issues that are important to people in that particular area. Is it something you can add to? How can you go about doing that? And why are you best qualified to address those issues? If you're just ignorant to those things, then I think you will see that reflected in the vote. So that would be.
Do either of you want to add?
Sure. I'll just say on the diversity aspect, Kim made the point earlier about going into a community and listening more. Because you may not come from a certain background like somebody else, or a very similar understanding of the world and things. It's important to listen and to be open to Houston is such a diverse community. It's unreal. We're the most diverse city in the United States. So you're going to have all different types of interests, all different types of backgrounds, all different types of demographics. And the last thing that somebody from a different background wants is somebody to come in and tell them that they know how it is, or I know what your perspective is. No, just go listen. People respond very well to that.
I was just going to say, one of the best campaigns that I've ever seen run had a volunteer leader in every single ethnicity across this city. Now, this was a big campaign, and not every campaign has the capacity or the resources to be able to fulfill that role. But I think it's something to be mindful of when you are running, because I think it's an excellent question. That is who we are. It's reflective of the city and what makes the city of Houston great if you're running in the city. And I think that having someone, or at least a few people that are able to be that ear to go and listen, if you are not personally able to go into the different communities, because they all meet at different times of the day and it's a big city or it's a big state. And I think it's very important to be mindful and to work that into your platform and your organizational chart in some manner.
Right. Did you want to add anything?
I would just say, from a statewide perspective, that you can have diversity in race, you can have diversity in geography, and a good example would be, every single legislator that comes to the Capitol, they have so many various issues. And my boss, for instance, he represents the coast. We constantly talk about coastal protection, protecting our resources here, particularly in Houston and Galveston, the ports, the industry, El Paso and the Valley. They one of their major issues is colonias, making sure that their constituents receive necessary resources to make sure that those constituents, that their needs are met. And so I think that you're going to have diversity in every single district in Texas, whether it's race, whether it's geography. And I think that that's what makes Texas great. And being at the Capitol, you learn about all of those diverse issues, and it makes us a better state when we understand those other areas and how diversity impacts them.
So let's take, I think, one more question from the audience. Anyone else have a question?
You guys did a lot of explaining up there about trying to get elected. What's your favorite part of all of the things you guys were describing? What's your favorite part of the political or the campaigning process?
Kim, we'll start with you.
The adrenaline rush. It is. I mean, that's what keeps us coming back for another campaign after you say, I'm done. At the end of one, win or lose, you're exhausted, you're wiped out, you're never going to do this again, and next cycle, you're right back in it again.
Support group for that?
Yeah, y'all.
Carrie?
I would just say it's an honor to work at the legislature. I do campaign politics and I do legislative politics. And I too am a campaign junkie, but it's also a privilege because you learn something new every day, every hour, and so it's like being in college nonstop because I can't absorb enough. It's just I don't have enough time to learn everything. If I could read every single resource that is put in front of me, it's amazing, and it's an amazing opportunity. And so I would just say it's just fascinating to be able to learn something new every single day.
All right, Olin?
I think if you have the pleasure of working for a candidate that it sort of resonates with you on all the issues, I think your adrenaline coupled with I'm doing something that can really make an impact on the community, really, the little sleep you have allows you to put your head down a little easier. But that's a really cool aspect. If you're someone who needs impact in the work you do, it can be a really fulfilling job.
Right. Josh?
I was going to say the best part is when it's over. But no, to add to Carrie's comment, the people that you meet during a campaign, I mean, you'd be blown away. You never would have understood or had the opportunity to just see what types of people are doing positive things within your community. And just that experience alone is priceless.
Great. So we actually have time for one more question. And Lauren, I think you had your hand up.
What is the best way to pick a political consultant? What are some good questions to ask as you're interviewing political consultants?
Carrie, we'll start with you.
I think that the evolution of consultants has changed significantly, at least in the last 2 decades that I've been in politics. When I first started, you didn't run without a consultant. Today, it really depends on what level of government and how much resources you have. But a lot of times I see first-time candidates pick, and feel like they need to put their resources into a consultant. And I would actually disagree with that. But there would probably be people that take issue with it. But I believe that if you have enough and a big enough network, and you can learn a few things and do them well, those key components of a campaign. There are so many free campaign schools, whether it's through one of the statewide parties, the Democrat Party, through the Republican Party. There's also nonprofits that put on campaign schools. I would just encourage you to go exhaust those resources before investing a lot into a general consultant that may or may not take you for a ride.
Thank you. Alan?
I think if you look at it in the way that if you can do some homework ahead of time, you're much better able to gauge. I can give you 100 questions, but if you believe every response the consultant gives you and you have nothing to bounce it off of, then how do you know what the value of the responses you're getting? So I think trying to understand your strategy, understanding the environment you're running in, what office it is, the timing of it, and sort of like relying on free resources first to help you understand what you should be thinking about will make the answers will allow you the opportunity to gauge the answers you're getting from a consultant. And so I think that's the most important thing. So do your due diligence, like anything else you would. Before you invest your money in anything, do your due diligence, ask for referrals, go through that process, but do as much homework on your particular area and your race and work it out with yourself as much as possible to get, to determine whether you're getting valuable responses.
Great. Josh?
I would say take an honest look at your first self and see what your own strengths are and what your own weaknesses are. Maybe you're a policy wonk and you're into, you can articulate tax policy or whatever it may be, but you're awful at organizational skills. So, take an honest look at yourself first, see where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then try to pair yourself with somebody that complements you and brings up your weaknesses and can kind of, give a good balance to the campaign.
In addition, I think that finding someone that complements your personality is extremely important, and finding that personality that you're going to be able to live with and that's not going to tell you everything that you think you want to hear, that's going to be willing to challenge you on a daily basis, on an hour-by-hour basis, and is not going to back down. There's going to be some discussion between the two of you, but at the end of the day, if that consultant is not strong enough to tell you what you don't want to hear but what you need to know, they're not going to be worth the money that you're paying them for.
Great. Well, can we have a round of applause for our first panel? So thank you so much, Josh, Kim, Carrie, and Alim for joining us tonight. We'll take a brief moment and swap panels. And while we're doing that, can I ask my lovely volunteers to pass out the handout that's going to go with the next session? So this panel is going to run just a little bit differently from the prior panel because each of the panelists you see in front of you represent a different aspect of the panel, which is, and we heard from our previous panel, the importance of being able to fund a run. And so this fantastic group of experts is going to talk about things you should be thinking about in order to fund a run. So before we hop into the content, let me introduce our panelists. I'm going to start here on my far right. We have Zach Miller, who is with Outreach Strategists, and he is a prior campaign staffer. And next to him, we have Regine Calvert, who is the founder of the 80/20 PAC, which is based here in Houston. She is also a prior political staffer, campaign staffer, and prior candidate. So she has a lot of different aspects of experience for us. To my left, we have Elizabeth Connor, who's a fundraising consultant, and she has over 15 years of experience raising money in all different kinds of political campaigns and across the spectrum of campaign from beginning to end. So we're going to be hearing a little bit about that from Elizabeth in a moment. And then next to Elizabeth, we have Jennifer Kim, who is a former Austin City Council member and political staffer. She's also the co-creator of a resource called Campaign in a Box, which she's going to talk to us about, and it's designed for that grassroots campaign, and she's going to walk us through a little bit of that as one of the questions that she's going to answer tonight. So we're going to start off with Elizabeth, who, as I mentioned, has sort of worked the spectrum of fundraising, to talk to us about what she refers to as the different buckets that you think about in terms of the money that you might raise for a campaign. So Elizabeth, walk us through the buckets.
Sure thing. And I'm going to kind of do this in a little bit of two parts that are both equally important. The first one is, who are you going to ask for money? And the second one is, how are you going to do it? So the first group that you're going to ask for money is people that you know, your friends, your family, anybody that you've basically ever met in your entire life. Friends from high school, friends from college, teachers, members of associations that you're involved with in your community, anybody that you can ever think of. And it's time consuming sort of to go through your entire life, but it is very, very much worth it, especially for a first time candidate, because once you do it, you'll always have that data. And those are going to be the people that you ask first and foremost. And some of them aren't going to be able to write you a big check. That's fine. $25 here, $50 here. Some of them might be able to write you a bigger check. But you need to ask these people first for a couple of reasons. One, you get to really hone in on your pitch that I think we'll talk about later and really perfect the ask that you're doing, so you can try it out on people that are close to you and that you know, and that will be a little bit probably nicer to you. Second, they already like you, or they already know something about you, so you don't have to do a really hard pitch, hopefully. And when you go after there's sort of the next tier of donors, whether they're like power donors that give institutional money to sort of have access for all intents and purposes, or people that you're cold calling that give ideological money, or people that you might have something in common with but you don't know on a very personal level, one of the first questions they're going to ask you is, how are you going to win? How much money do you have to raise? And how much have you raised already? And if you answer that last question with a very small number, they're probably not going to invest in your race because they don't think that you're viable. So to show that viability, it's sort of the chicken and the egg. It's like, oh, I have to show that I have money before I can ask people for money. That's where that personal circle comes into effect. So you can talk to the people that you know already to raise the money from them. And then talking about how to do it. Most important thing that you will do as a candidate is call time. And that's where you're sitting in a room and you're dialing for dollars. It's a little telemarketing-ish, but a little bit more personal than that. You can't get around it. You have to do it. You can make it fun. Some people like it, some people don't. It's okay. But there's no other excuse. You're just going to have to do it. You have to ask people for money on the phone. That is sort of the best bang for your buck. It's usually about a 30 to 50% response rate, and it's very cheap. It's time consuming, but it's cheap. It doesn't cost you a lot of money to do that. So when you're getting ready to call somebody, whether you know them or not, you'll have a sheet that you're either one of your staffers or you, depending on where you are in the race and the size of your race. will need to have some information before you call them, especially if you don't know them. Obviously, contact information. Do they have a nickname? What do they go by? What do they do? Biographical information. Where did they go to college? See if you can find some sort of hook to start a conversation with somebody, especially if you don't know them. And then also you can look at their giving history on the political side. So you can, all of that's public information. You just do a search on Texas Ethics Commission for state. There's a couple of different websites for federal, City of Houston for more local stuff, and see sort of their range so you know what dollar amount to ask them for. So I can't stress the importance of call time enough. Also, fundraising events. I know probably everybody in this room gets invited to at least 4 or 5 every day. They do not take the place of call time. Doing events is very important. People like the FaceTime. People like to meet you, come and see you. It's fun, but you're still going to have to do call time to back up those events. And events are usually about a 15% response rate, so don't think that you'll just be able to send out an email, an invitation, and just get a bunch of people to come. You still really have to work it. The most productive way to do it is to get a host or a host committee that's going to help you do some lifting and invite their friends and other people that they know. So it's not all on you, and that way you can expand your network a little bit too. Biggest thing about events is they can get very expensive, so keep those costs as low as possible. People will say, you need to do it here, you need to spend this much money. No. Political fundraising is very different than nonprofit fundraising. Keep those event costs very, very low. The norm is probably about 8% is how much you should be spending on it. I'm very cheap, so all of mine are under 6. The other big bucket is sort of the mail online, and I kind of talk about them the same, even though they're pretty different, but it's about the same response rate. It's usually between 1 and 3, so it's not that great of a response rate. Mail is extremely expensive, so you probably just don't even want to waste your time on it, but I'll tell you, as a candidate, you will get approached by fundraising mail vendors. With online, it's cheap to do, but you need to have a pretty big list to actually get a decent return on it. Everybody should do it, at least a little bit, especially around deadlines. People like the urgency on email, but don't expect to raise, what the presidential candidates raise online. You're not going to raise $4 million in a day. They have lists of millions and millions of people, and they have 24-hour news coverage. Build your email list, build it organically, and you'll have a little bit of return on it, but don't think that it's a magic bullet either. I know it took a long time.
No, that's so. No, thank you, because you've kind of framed out the next set of questions. So actually, I'm going to take it from the grassroots all the way up. So we're going to go to you next, Jennifer. I would first like for you to talk about Campaign in a Box and the idea behind a grassroots tool for new campaigns, the kind of campaign that makes sense for, and just sort of that grassroots fundraising effort in general.
So when you look at like a big race like Houston City Council, they have infrastructure, they're raising a lot of money, they've got staff, they've got offices, but most of the races in the United States are for like school board in Caldwell County or Lampasas. I mean, there are way more races that are smaller races, and they don't have access to consultants. They don't even have a mail vendor in town. They're searching online for how do I do this and kind of learning on their own. And their staff is probably like their 14-year-old son who's going to set up the website using a template and figure out WordPress if they can. So I just created this product for people who really have a passion for public service. And I just believe that just because they don't know how to run a campaign shouldn't hold them back from serving the public. If they have integrity and if they really want to do a good job and or just create change in their community or fix a problem in their community. And people run for many different reasons. They may have an axe to grind. They may have a passion for a particular issue, or they may just want to restore integrity to the office. Because they don't believe the office holder or the office holders are doing an appropriate job for the public. And so one thing I focus on in my manual is fundraising, and then I'll have the DVD too with videos and templates, because people don't have time to figure out how to do a tracking web sheet, a spreadsheet for all their fundraising, because when you make a lot of calls, it's easy to lose track as to who you called, how much you asked, when you called them. If you can look and see, did I call them 2 weeks ago? Is it time to call them again? Or has a month gone by? Oh my gosh, they said they were going to send a check in and it hasn't come in yet. That's a huge endeavor to track all this stuff, especially if you're raising $25 at a time for some of these smaller races. So, but you also have to get used to asking, like Elizabeth said, asking for money on the phone. And so as someone who is, if your first time, you're going to feel kind of nervous, like what do I say? How do I approach it? Do I just hit them between the eyes with the ask? No, you don't do that. You got to warm them up. So I put together a script which we passed out so you can kind of follow. And of course, as you get more comfortable with this, you're going to make this your own, and you're going to put in your own style. You're going to put in your own sense of humor. You're going to be doing a little bit of listening and having some back and forth as to what's going on in their life. But I just kind of thought this would be helpful, just starting out, to think about and to rehearse with a friend before you pick up the phone for that first one, which is always the most nerve-wracking one. So if you want to start from the top, you just say, hello, Jan, how are you doing? And then you have some light conversation. You want to find out what's going on with you, what's new with you. And these are going to be people that you know, either professionally or civically, people that you may even be friends with, but you still want to find out, how are you doing? They want to know that you care, right? So after you have a little bit of discussion, like, oh, summer break is coming, we're going to Disney World, you talk a little bit about that. Then you get into the part where they know you're calling for a reason. You're not really calling to chat, okay? So they're expecting you to talk about, your campaign. So, well, I'm calling to talk about my campaign. Do you have a minute? So ask for permission, okay? Don't assume it's the best time. So they'll probably say yes, or they say, I've got to run to soccer practice. Can you call me at 7 p.m. tonight? That's going to be a better than, just diving in and then they're kind of rushed and they're not really paying attention. They just want to get you on the phone. So as you may have heard, I'm running for city council. And in 30 seconds, talk about why you're running and your priorities, okay? So you should have no more than 3 priorities, because if you're lucky, they'll remember 2. All right, so 3 is the most, and you shouldn't go into long detail about it. So 30 seconds, find a way to just summarize in 30 seconds. If they have more questions, then they'll ask you, which is great, but just kind of keep it at 30 seconds. And then you want to ask for money. Right now, I'm trying to raise money for my campaign so I can reach as many voters as possible. Would you be able to help me with $100? So I put that number there, $100. I don't know what you're going to be asking for, but you have to ask them for a specific amount. You can't just say, so anything you could do would be great, because that will lead to nothing. And then you will not be able to follow up and say, so do you think you could help me with something? You won't even know if you should follow up with them. If they say, well, maybe I can help with something. You don't know what to do with that. I'd rather that someone say no, because I know what to do with a no. But if you have an open-ended, a maybe, then you don't know what to do with that, and you just kind of spent your time and you don't know what to do with that. So ask for a specific amount, and when you have your Rolodex, or I don't think people have Rolodex anymore, but when you have your index cards, or your list, your spreadsheet of people, there should be next to their name the phone number and the specific dollar amount you're going to ask them. And people can usually do about $100, okay? But there's a whatever amount you feel appropriate is for the size of the race. So you want to stay quiet and you want to wait for their response. Then if they say yes, say thank you. Would you be able to make a contribution online through my website? Or if you prefer, you can send a check. What would you like to do? So let them tell you how they would do it. If you take credit cards, which is better, because then you just do it right away. Or if you prefer, you can give me a credit card over the phone and you'll get a receipt emailed. What would you like to do? So they'll tell you how to do it. If they say no, that's no, that's just too much for me right now. I've got bills to pay. Just say, I understand. Well, whatever you can donate would be very helpful. Do you think you could maybe help with $50? Basically half the amount that you asked them, okay? My mother would listen to me do the calls, and she would just wince when she would hear me do that. Just ask for the half of it. And again, if they say no, just say, that's fine, really, I understand. Could you please remember to vote for me on November 4th? And please ask others to do as well. They'll say, of course, I'll get the word out. It was great talking to you, take care, all right, and smile and say bye. So that's kind of it. So
great, thank you. So we're talking about like very grassroots. You're making all these phone calls that Elizabeth has told us about, so very helpful. And then the next bucket that we were talking about is sort of more for your traditional idea of donors, and that's events. So Zach, I'm going to come to you next, and I want you to maybe talk to us a little bit about the, what it looks like to put together an event, some thought that you give to the donors that you might invite to one, and then also, because, follow up, as you mentioned in our call, is such an important part of maintaining a donor base. It's like, what does it look like to maintain a relationship with someone that has become a supporter of your campaign?
Oh, okay, great question. So before I answer that, a shout out to my students from HCC who trucked all the way over here from the far west side of town to join us tonight. I have a feeling at least one or two of them are going to wind up running for office one day soon. So I've been involved with lots and lots of different campaigns, from like state and local all the way up to federal, and I'm always the person kind of leaning against the back wall. I'm always staff. I have a face that belongs behind a curtain, not so much in front of a podium. But the real difference between these events is what dollar amount are you going after, and what office are you running for. So if you're trying to do a really high dollar fundraiser for like a national congressional committee, it's probably worthwhile to invest the time and the resources into building, into building a pretty impressive event. And that can take on a bunch of different forms. But one way that we approached it was to have a formal evening event. It was a sit-down dinner. And rather than do 20 people, each of them paying $5,000 or $10,000, we did 400 people, each of them paying $250. So this was able to kind of expand the reach of the event, and those 400 people are going to vote for those candidates because they have some skin in the game, right? At a much smaller level, one of the most intimate things that you can do is to just kind of ask people that you're close to, who have done well professionally, or even by your standards if they're somewhat lower. Ask them to host a little get-together for you at their house, right? And ask them, hey, if you know some people who'd be interested in getting involved, I would really appreciate it. And if they can see their way clear to supporting my campaign financially, that's great. But don't think that every event you have to do has to involve black tie and hors d'oeuvres, It just doesn't. So the other thing that you need to do is really be thoughtful about how you are targeting people and how you're going to reach out to them, and then more importantly, how are you going to follow up with them? So you better believe that if somebody writes you a check with a significant number of zeros, you need to be somewhat attentive to them and call and thank them. Thank you notes are huge, and as a candidate, you may not always have time to write the thank you note, and that usually falls to staff. So I've forged lots of thank yous. But it's important because, like anything else, if someone's going to give you essentially a gift to support you, then you need to acknowledge that. Now, I think on our planning call, we'd also talked about there is, of course, a fine line between acknowledging when you have a relationship with a donor and then anything sort of that would even approach a sort of an inappropriate sort of pay-for-play kind of relationship. So here's what I will say on that. People should give you money because you're going to return their phone call, but you're not returning their phone call because they gave you money. You're returning the phone call because any constituent who calls and needs your assistance is going to get a call back from you, right? That's the kind of thing that they're investing in terms of your run for office. And then, I'm sorry, your last question was how do you maintain that sort of database?
Well, right. So maintaining relationships with donors. Someone who's written you a check or has consistently started writing you checks. How do you keep up with that group of people so that you start maintaining a database of donors?
Oh, okay. So that's really a matter of giving them some personal time and attention that is unrelated to the fact that they gave you money. So if you're going to get together with some folks for breakfast, invite them to come along to breakfast and make them part of your social network. Or if not your social network, make them feel like that relationship goes beyond a check, which is a pretty decent thing to do anyway. But that's one way to actually maintain some of those donor ties, is to make them feel like they're not just a donor. That's especially important when they are just a donor. But
Great. Thank you, Zach. So, Regine, Regine is the founder of the 80-20 PAC, and I know that when we hear PAC or even Super PAC, that can sound kind of scary to the average, person. Their political action committees or something sort of bigger. And so I wonder if you might just take a moment to demystify the PAC. Like, what are the purpose? You can talk about 80-20 PAC, for example, and then maybe just the interaction between a candidate and a PAC. When does it make sense to approach a PAC? What do PACs look for in candidates?
So we created the Houston 80-20 PAC, and what that means is that there's a concept that for any issue or candidate, for example, you have 20% of one extreme that will always be on this extreme and 20% on the other side. And in the middle you have 60% or 60 left. So what you try to do, or what we tried to do as the PAC, is to try to coalesce the other 20%. It could be on either side, but we wanted 80%. And it really took the concept of really the Jewish community, which is very small, but very powerful, especially politically. So what is their secret? They unified, in their voting and endorsements and all. So we created the Houston 80-20 Asian American PAC, and it was one of the first Asian American PACs in Houston. Obviously, we created it because we had some commonality being all Asian, and the issues that we supported and the candidates we supported, we wanted to, encourage those that were supporting our issues or our community. They didn't have to be Asian, but we also have as an objective to support qualified Asian candidates just to keep the pipeline going. And at the time we were formed about 16 years ago, there were very few candidates that were Asian, and so it was to encourage them. But the beauty of a PAC, if you're interested in forming one, is that you can endorse. You have to, of course, form it under the state or the federal guidelines. And if you're a local PAC, which means you can endorse in local races, county, city, school board, state, that would be the state that you're in. And then the federal, of course, would be the congressional races. It allowed us to raise money and to endorse candidates. So nonprofits, as many of you know, are not allowed to do that, especially 501c3s don't do that and can't do that illegally. We have been going on for 15, 16 years, and we try to endorse in every race. Again, actually tonight I'm missing our endorsement meeting. We are endorsing candidates in the Fort Bend County race. And one of the reasons why is Fort Bend County, as you know, very multicultural, and is probably the most concentrated area for Asian Americans. 1 out of 3 people in Sugar Land is Asian American, which is pretty high. So we'll see how that goes. So really, to form it is not difficult, but you must, as in anything having to do with campaign, you must comply with reporting. So you would report just like a candidate reports their financials, and that's important to do, to keep good records and to report. But it gives you some leverage. We find that candidates and groups seek out our endorsement, and the perception, is 99% of reality that, we can really congregate and mobilize, I should say, the support for them. And we try to. So we do things like sending out postcards to Asian American surname voters, and we can use the voter rolls to identify their voting patterns and all, where they live, and we try to focus on them and target them to vote for the candidates and issues that we believe in and feel that will support our community. Anyway, so it's not real difficult. Now, there are different levels of PACs, and we've got some, and I think it was mentioned in the other panel that there's 20,000 realtors, which is a major PAC, and they give major monies, and it's great to get their endorsement because you have not only their money but their votes. And some of them, like the LGBT PAC, is very strong, and they actually print their slate, and you see people carrying it into the polls, and it's very indicative of the strength and power of that group. So PACs can be based on issues. They can be based on partisan. So the Republicans have PACs and the Democrats have PACs. By the way, the 80-20 PAC is nonpartisan, and I mentioned to the group that that's kind of challenging because, some things are not nonpartisan. You usually take one issue or one side or the other. But we try to maintain a nonpartisan stance because we, again, are looking at the issues and the candidates that will support us. But it can be very helpful. So money, votes, the recognition and the credibility it gives a candidate is important. But you got to work for it. You usually have to fill out a very lengthy questionnaire, and they use that. And then many of them actually interview you personally, one-to-one. And you're sitting there in front of a panel, and so it's very intense. But again, once you get that endorsement, it means a whole lot.
Great, thank you. So Jennifer, I want to come back to you because one of the things that Regine just mentioned, came up during our preparation conversation, and that's the issue of ethics, which is obviously a really important one when you're dealing with money, and not just money, but other people's money, and there are strict reporting requirements having to do with that. But there are also tough situations that can come up when it comes to money. So I would love for you to share with our group some of the ways in which you can handle the tough situations when it comes to money, particularly when there are ethical considerations involved.
So I think people try and stay out of jail, generally speaking, but you may have times that people are really expecting something in exchange and they don't know that what they're doing is blatantly illegal. So I'll give you 2 instances of what happened to me. So someone came to my office, my campaign office. I didn't know who he was. He was some sort of real estate person. I guess he had real estate interests. I'd never heard of him before. And he was with a friend of his, and he said, I have raised money in the past for candidates, and I want to find out more about you because I'd really like to support you, and I really want a position on the planning commission. And I can raise easily $20,000 for you, which in that race was a lot of money because we had $100 limits. So, that I just didn't know. I just kind of like hemmed and hawed and kind of, asked him more about him. And then I talked, thank God I had a political consultant. His name was Peck Young, and this old grouchy guy who was like, hell no, that is illegal. I cannot believe this. And so thank God, even though we put him down on the pledge list as says he can raise $20,000, I never followed up with him on that. But that did happen. And then second time, some guy who, he was a great guy, just really was excited about the campaign, and had a convenience store, and he had lots of friends and family who had convenience stores. And he's like, how much money do you need? And I said, well, whatever you can raise. He's like, okay, do you want $2,000? I was like, yeah, sure, if you can raise $2,000 from your friends and your family. So he also had a, what did you call it, those, what are those things when you wire money, those not MoneyGrams or
Western Union.
Money orders. So he had a money order business. So he said, come pick it up. And so it was a bunch of money orders in sequence with the same handwriting with different people's names. And I went back to my my campaign fundraiser, and she was like, I cannot advise you to accept this. You have to give it back. I was like, okay, I will do that. So I gave it back to him. I was like, I can't take this. If they want, it's okay to bundle. It's perfectly legal for them to bundle. You don't have to personally meet the people who give you money. I said, but they have to be checks from their personal accounts, okay, that they sign from, people who are actually inside the city limits of Austin, because I hit the outside city limit. And he's like, oh, that's so much harder. I was like, I know, but that's kind of how it works. So he did it. He got people to write checks for me. So I think that if you are ever in a sticky situation, find a way to get a legal opinion, and it doesn't have to be in writing. Sometimes it's better if it's not in writing. You can maybe call like the city ethics officer, even though or someone who's on the ethics commission who has experience. You're not asking for a pure like legal opinion where you need it in writing and that may come back to bite them. You're just asking for advice. Like you can even talk in hypotheticals, like, so what if this happened and how would you deal, and so and of course, if you have to, then just research the law. And sometimes it's got to be case law, but or have someone do that. But just know how you're going to handle that before it happens. That you will have to go to someone who is a reliable, legitimate source for legal advice.
Great, thank you. So, and then Zach, one thing that Jennifer just mentioned is the fact that different races have different caps on the amount of money that you can raise. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I can. So we knew that this was going to come up, and so I spent some time this afternoon researching this. So there, federal limits are considerably higher. Now you do have a cap of $2,000 for a donation to a candidate, directly to a candidate. That amount goes up if you are donating to a PAC. All right. So to max out, to get the maximum contribution to a PAC, I think is $30,000 or $34,000, and that is sort of indexed to inflation. So some years it's slightly higher, some years it's slightly lower. Then when you get down to the state of Texas, this is interesting. The prohibitions are no union money, no blatantly corporate money, and other than that, sky's the limit, really. So you can in fact ask for and receive a check that's pretty significant for the state of Texas. And I know that someone in here, I think on the last panel, was this. So please correct me if I'm wrong. I don't want to give poor advice, but that is my understanding. Now, when you get to the Harris County level, again, there's really no fixed limitation. And remember, there's two types of donations. There's cash donations where somebody's going to write you a check, and then there's also in-kind donations. So an in-kind donation, I don't think ever has a cap, because that's really what you're doing is you're allowing them to use your real estate or your restaurant or whatever, okay? Now you do have to report that just like you would a cash donation, but it's an in-kind donation, so it's non-cash. So state of Texas, Harris County, I don't believe there is one. Now city of Houston, you are capped at $5,000 per candidate per campaign. Now the PACs can donate up to $10,000. And you as an individual, I don't believe there's a cap on what you can write to a PAC, right?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so. So if you want to write a PAC a great big fat check, talk to Regine after.
We've never had this.
She will have yes. Bear in mind, this is always a great problem to have. This is a fantastic problem to have. But as my colleagues in the panel have said, if you ever have a question about that, make sure you're speaking to someone who is knowledgeable. And just to finish off my response, you asked the first panel, what's the first thing you do? How do you get started when you want to run for office? Well, I will tell you, you will go and file for a campaign treasurer, because you cannot accept any donations until you have a treasurer filed. All right? Give some thought to who this treasurer is going to be. Because after you file for your treasurer, now go find someone that you trust to actually run this money, all right, and keep an eye on these books, because that's not generally the treasurer's job. You as the candidate are responsible for making sure that everything is reported. Your campaign treasurer is responsible for affixing their signature to these reports. But I guarantee you, if you find someone who is knowledgeable about accounting practices, who will prepare these reports for you, you will always, always, always have a much lower risk of having any kind of mistakes. And if you do make a mistake, always file an amended report. The most important thing is to ask when you have a question, and if the money doesn't smell right, just give it back. I hope that takes care of the question.
The local, you mentioned the local's 5,000
Yeah.
per, yeah. It's also per person, so in a household with a couple, each can give 5,000.
Yes.
So.
All right.
Can you give money for your kids? Are they legally people in this situation?
It depends. I think it's different on the Fed and on the state, and there's somebody, compliance is not exactly my expertise, but I believe City of Houston, you can't, if it's somebody that can't vote, I think. Is that not true?
Yeah, they must be over 18.
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I mean. Over 18. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say can't vote. Over 18. But you can look at all the different ethics websites and they'll be able to tell you.
Right. So, and then Rogine, Zach has already sort of touched on this, but can you have been a candidate and you've also been involved in the campaigns, and can you talk us through a little bit what these reporting requirements look like and why they're so important?
Well, I think they're all automated now. When the automation works, the city system was out for a while, and we ran into some issues. I don't know if you all know that. Say again.
We were trying to make it better.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes. Well, thank you for trying. It was scary. I mean, for those of us who couldn't get our information on. But yes, they're automated. They're pretty easy to understand. But if you keep good records to begin with, so it all goes back to your campaign database from the start. When you start with your list of your call list, keep a good record of who's giving you what, and of course if you're thanking them, you will have your database all fixed up there too, because all of that goes on to your campaign records is each donation. And of course over a certain amount, if you're just getting a few dollars, I think you can clump it together, but it's pretty easy. And then your expenses also must get reported. So like Zach said, even in kind, if someone gives you a fundraiser and they donate their restaurant or food, be sure you report that. I know someone who didn't mean it, and you know, a lot of us don't mean to do this. It's either just oversight or careless or something, but they didn't report food that was donated to their campaign, and your enemy, your opponent, is going to find that. People are paid to go through these stupid campaign reports. And we do it every 6 months or something, yeah. And they go through it and they find discrepancies, and that's when it comes back to bite you.
So I want to go ahead and turn to our audience now. My lovely assistant can pass around the microphone.
You're our friend. Don't ask a bad question.
I promise it's an easy question. Rogine, you touched on it a little bit just recently, and I'd love to hear from the group. We talked a lot about raising money, and I think it'd be good to understand what you can and cannot spend your money on.
Elizabeth, can we actually start with you on that one?
Oh, I can answer it a little bit. Again, compliance isn't exactly my strong suit, and I definitely don't want to give anybody any wrong information. It has to be for your campaign. So you can't go out and take your family to a nice steak dinner and pay for it with the campaign credit card. Because technically you could, but it's illegal. It really does have to be legitimate campaign expense to get you into that office or keep you in that office. There is, I know, some gray area. Some people, especially on a federal or a statewide level, will use it for like haircuts and that. But you can also sort of make that argument that that's part of your public image. I'd be very careful with that. There's gifts. You'll see that on a lot of finance reports a lot, constituent gifts. Some of those are legitimate, flowers for funerals. A lot of people buy, like the state of Texas coffee mugs to give to their donors or their super volunteers. All legitimate, but be pretty careful. You don't want anything that looks crazy on there.
I can also tell you that there is, so we just covered this in class the other night. We can ask one of my students the difference between hard money and soft money. So that this is just a very, very broad general definition. So, and hopefully I don't screw this up. Hard money is money that you can spend to get out the message, vote for X, right? That's hard money. Soft money is money that you can use to say everything but vote for X, all right? And then you have what are called S-PACs and G-PACs. You have specific purpose PACs. That's going to be money that's dedicated to saying, get out and vote for me or get out and vote for X. That's a specific purpose for that money. And then you have what's called a G-PAC, a general purpose PAC. That's what 80/20 is, right? And it's money that can be used to advocate for messaging, advocate for issues, but it cannot be used for saying vote for X explicitly.
Oh, well, then that's not what we are.
Okay.
Yeah, because we can't endorse people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to also point out, you can make yourself alone. And some candidates do that just to sort of kick off their campaign. And counted as a loan, recorded as a loan, because then you can get paid back when you make bukus of money later. But in the beginning, it's a little tight, yeah. But people do that. But it has to be recorded.
Do you want to add anything?
Just be aware of perceptions. One of the candidates for county judge in Travis County legitimately spent a lot of money in taking people out for coffee or breakfast to be able to explain why he was running and ask for support, but he did it a lot. So when you looked at his expenses, his burn rate through his money, even though he'd raised the most money, was incredible. And a lot of it was on like restaurant expenses. And so the incumbent, the one who was a county commissioner, used that against him. Is like, can we really trust this guy being in charge of, our county coffers if he's spending money this way? So I think it's not just the illegality, but the perception. But also on the other hand, you can give to nonprofits. So if you have sometimes if the laws permit, you can have an office holder account. You can do different things with that. So like, for example, buying tickets for United Way's gala, or donations for sponsorship of a nonprofit event. I think those are things that are customary with an office holder account, or even if you're a candidate and you need to be at that event. You don't want someone to necessarily gift you the ticket, and that would be an in-kind. You could do that, but that would be an in-kind contribution. You could just say, I insist on buying my own ticket to go to this event. So those are things that you can do.
And to back up on what Jennifer just mentioned, if a candidate does have a finance report that is full of lunches and breakfast, I as a donor would be enraged and probably not give you another dime. And they will find out about stuff like that. They say, oh, you're just taking my money and spending it on some sort of lavish lifestyle. So you really don't want to make your donors mad.
We have time for another question.
The value of volunteer hours, is that an issue that needs to be tracked in a campaign? I know in the nonprofit world, the value of a volunteer donor can be used as an in-kind value, not hard money, but tracked as a contribution. Is that a thing?
No,
in
it's
campaigns?
not, unless it's a service. So if your best friend or neighbor is an accountant and they're doing actual accounting work and keeping your books, then you would have to in-kind that. But if it's somebody that's block walking or phone banking or just general volunteer office hours, you don't need to record that as an in-kind.
For any reason?
If you want to, reward the person that
For
had the most
messaging-
hours for that week, but for a financial compliance standpoint, no.
If you do go have a phone bank at a law firm, sometimes it may be expected that you kind of report that as an in-kind donation of use of their phones. But I think most people use their cell phones today anyway.
Yeah.
So, not a big deal.
So we have one last question.
Hi, my name is Mark, and I live in Japan. And in Japan, huge political contributions from religious institutions is okay.
Oh.
And I want to know what's it classified under here in Texas, because I don't know, and
Illegal.
Okay.
Most religious institutions in the U.S., most if not all, are 501c3s. It's just their tax designation, so they cannot give directly to campaigns.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we have a round of applause for our second panel? So Jennifer, Elizabeth, Regine, and Zach, thank you so much. So just a couple of final things before we split. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight and joining us for our town hall on the nuts and bolts for running for office. We have a fantastic camera crew in the back that have been live streaming this event for us, and yes. So thank you to Iggy and his team for doing that for us. There will also be a video of the event that will be promoting on the League of Women Voters Facebook page after this if you want to share it with anyone else who might benefit from the information. And as I mentioned, stay tuned to our page because we will be planning programming on civic issues throughout the year, and we would love to see you turn out for some of those as well. So again, thank you for coming, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks to Rita for putting this
Yes.
on.
Yay, Rita.